When you think of manga, you probably think of many different images. You probably think of the panels, you probably think of the characters. Some of us think of the volume covers. Lately, now more than ever, I've been thinking more of just the publishers, the issue covers, and the magazines. Not long ago, I made a video talking about where people go to read Berserk in Japan, the young animal issues as what they were to begin with and what they look like today. It's a really good video, check it out, I'm very happy with it. And from that, I've become more and more interested in the history of manga magazines, how they started, where they are now. I looked at all the first issues of the majors. I looked at the first issue of Weekly Shonen Jump and I looked at the latest issue, and it's just so cool to see the difference of where it began and where it is now. But looking through all the different publications and the first issues of my favorite manga series, I started to garner an appreciation for the artwork of manga magazines. And today I want to talk about what I love about the art of manga magazines and what I think is really cool about them and what is genuinely interesting to me about manga magazines. And you know what? Stick around, you might learn a bit about actual manga magazine stuff, maybe. Before we talk about manga magazines and how they came to be what they are now, we have to talk about magazines in general. So the first magazine ever documented, according to Wikipedia, was in 1663 in Germany. It was the Arbelosch Monthas Unterdungen. I'm going to go with that. And it was a literary and philosophy magazine. So a lot of magazines, when they first started propping out from then, the 1663 to the 1700s and further on, a lot of magazines were actually about philosophy and literacy. Philosophy by then was already an established norm. People already knew about philosophy, people could find it, people could research it. Most books at that time were either basic literacy or just the workings of people thinking, yes, this bowl isn't a bowl. Those magazines weren't like the magazines you know today. Now, they could have had an illustrated image on the front, but most of the time they were a pamphlet that you could open just once, or it was a double-sided piece of paper. Think of like Bridgerton when that gossip girl puts out the pamphlets. It looked like that. They either had news about people who had certain stories to tell, about upcoming books, and like I said, philosophy. It was the most common thing. And most magazines around the time were talking about philosophy, and philosophy is the study of life and the talk of the human condition. And sometimes it even garnered its way into politics. And politics and philosophy usually had a battle in between of what magazines at the time were really publicating. Sometimes journalism was the beginning in terms of the magazine and would often try and talk about the corrupt nature of institutions, politicians, and also the hypocrisy of philosophers. And that was kind of like the whole drama of the magazine. And as time went on, magazines today, if you go into your local grocery store or your local newsagent, you'll find magazines that still have that drama, but instead of being about the philosophers, it's about whether or not Meghan Markle is a piece of shit for just wanting to be an independent woman. I don't know. That's kind of drama. Whatever. She's cool. I loved her in Suits. And so as they crept their way to the rest of the world in terms of how every magazine does their own publication, you can see that they started out all actually as either just blank text or illustrations, because at least in the early days, illustration was cheaper than film. If you look at any like 1940s poster, most of the posters were illustrations of the characters that would appear in the film and drawn in a way that you could recognize, oh, that's Clark Gable, that's Marilyn Monroe. It was cheaper to draw them. And as time went on and photographs were actually getting cheaper and cheaper, that's when they started using posters and magazines showcasing real people. With manga magazines, in the early beginnings, it was pretty much the same vibe. It was easier and cheaper to create illustrations than actual people. Now let's look at Shonen Jump, for example. Even just their side issues always started with usually illustrations of not really characters, but things and interests that was a part of their target demographic. I've talked about the target demographic before, but again, with shonen being for young boys and shoujo being for young girls. There were some issues of spin-offs using real-life figures. You know, they would have a boy and a baseball player, or they would have an illustrated version of that. It would depend on the budget, I guess, of the spin-off or of the issue or of that specific publication. But most of the time, they would use illustrations. And again, as manga started to take off, they would use characters on the front of the magazines to promote the newest issue and the newest chapter of the story that you were looking to read. Now, where does the artwork of magazines come into it? How do they even look interesting? Because magazines, like they're all meant to be, are meant to be eye-catching. They're meant to grab your attention and pull you in to buy this piece of magazine every week, every month, right? And I think the way they do that is really cool, but also at the same time, because they have characters that you like on the front, it's actually much more effective. Think of maybe any relative you have who reads these magazines like tabloids. They're probably looking for celebrities that they like, that they idealize or they hate. And they're going to find those tabloid magazines and they're going to read about them as much as they can. I think magazines, I've always seen today especially, slowly trickled into the YouTube meta that is clickbait. If you look at any YouTube thumbnail, to a certain degree, no matter how artistic you think it is, there is a certain amount of clickbait to it that engages the viewer to think, I have to read this, right? And that is what magazines, especially manga magazines, do today. Let's take any kind of manga magazine image that I've taken before and I stick it on here. You're going to want to know who this character is, especially if you don't know who they are and you want to know their story. If I take an image right here of Goku from one random issue I've picked out of randomness, you're probably looking and thinking like, if you didn't know who this was and you saw this character, you'd probably be interested in finding out who he is and what his story is. Even the early ones, take JoJo, take Young Animal, even V-Jump, which is like a spin-off of Shonen Jump, take Platinum End, take Death Note. These are all the kind of covers that are shown of these characters throughout the years, and it's engaging and eye-catching to see. If I put on a thumbnail of a character you already know and certain amounts of text that make you think I want to read this, you're probably going to click on the video in the thumbnail. Manga magazines do this in a similar way, where the text complements the image itself. There are certain photographic techniques of having something in the foreground and the background. And usually, manga volumes and manga magazines follow this principle of having something that catches the eye. But what's really cool about manga magazines is that they'll either use the stock footage already and play around it with different ways, or they'll use original artwork tailored towards the front of the magazine. Here are some that I really like. There's one, of course, of Super Saiyan 2, Gohan, and Goku doing the Kamehameha. And on V-Jump, it looks amazing. It's really cool. It's eye-catching. It reminds me of the scene. And if you're reading the story as it's airing, you're probably thinking, man, I gotta read this chapter. You're looking at JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's very pink. It's eye-catching. And sure, there's a lot happening on the magazine that, you know, a lot of us probably can't read if you're an English-speaking viewer. But even then, there's a lot on here that stands out just because the characters themselves don't blend into the text. The text complements the characters. And in a way, it's cluttered enough that it feels cohesive. And there are ones that are a bit cleaner. I found this one of Rei from Evangelion, which I thought was really cool. It really showed, even though you could have been an anime original manga, or you could have been something inside the popular culture of Japan, that still would have made the front of a manga magazine. Now look at this publication of Shonen Jump from 1997. Is the character Areli, a character that Akira Toriyama made back in the day. And she was kind of the front face of Shonen Jump for a bit. And here she is dressed up as Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, and everything else on the magazine is centered around Final Fantasy VII. There were a couple of other issues around this time that also did this kind of gimmick, but it was cool because it made you realize what was currently trending in Japan at the time. It's kind of a history piece as well. You can look at this and be like, this came out the same time as Final Fantasy VII. This one came out during 2001. You can tell when the tones change, and in a way, there's an artwork to the kind of collaboration of seeing characters acknowledge the real world. Seeing Aurelie dressed up riding a chocobo kind of makes you realize that, yeah, 1997 was a big year for the Japanese people with Final Fantasy VII and popular culture in general. So much so that they mixed together, they collaborated unintentionally. Magazines do this everywhere else in the world, but not to this extent that it's almost like I have to respect them for wanting to draw the character like this. It's artwork in its own way. Here's another one, again, of Shaquille O'Neal and a character from a basketball manga. To commemorate him, I guess. I don't know. I couldn't find any more research about this one, but this was such an iconic magazine cover. I was like, what the hell? I would love to have your favorite anime character right next to, I don't know, if you love basketball. There you go. I love it. It didn't stop there. It was in collaboration with any huge events that happened in the world. This recent Attack on Titan one from whenever the manga was nearing its end, it's all the characters taking a selfie. Who would have thought there was an image of that? And sure, it may seem tonally weird to have all these characters take a selfie, especially if some of them want to kill the others. But it kind of makes you realize that the author and the publishers know that you as the audience like these characters, and to present them in a way that is different to what it is that you're reading is almost kind of like not in character. There's this idea in a lot of great sitcoms and skits throughout the years of having these fictional characters actually just be actors in their own way. And when they're out of character, they are just put in publications to be the everyday people. It's the same with Shonen Jump whenever it has its collaborations of anniversaries, having characters do motion signs that are from the other series. I'm pretty sure I remember seeing Deku do ninjutsu sign. And I was thinking, hey, that's pretty cool. You don't see that in any kind of like other publication. You see it online with people, fans who make collaborations of their favorite characters, but to see it from a publisher that owns the characters, it's something else entirely cool. And I think it's one of the things that people love about properties like Smash Brothers, having characters who all intersect and some ways could be in the same universe, actually are, and interact with each other in a way that makes you go, hey, it's like you owning your toys again, and you're putting the characters from two different properties that don't associate together. The artwork of manga magazines is so cool in the way that each magazine issue as well, looking at the first publications, is really historical in a way. Seeing the first issue to the public of this story and then looking back and seeing it and looking at it now, just seeing how much has changed. Looking at the first issue of Dragon Ball here is so bewildering, and seeing just how simple and cool the artwork as a cool story adventure, to then seeing it later in V-Jump next to like Yu-Gi-Oh cards, how much has changed throughout the years. Seeing now the recent publications of Chainsaw Man as the hype is building more and more for the anime to come out. Seeing JoJo's, seeing Evangelion, seeing Steve McQueen at one point. I can't find out why this is here. I don't know why he's here. Yeah, I couldn't find out a reason for this one. If anyone could like help me out with the research. The magazine manga art is something that is really unique. It's something that doesn't really have rules to it. The text can be as big as you want it to be. It can be behind, it can be in front, it can be all over. The character is almost a part of the magazine. It's like they take the centerpiece, especially when they're the most popular character of that week or of that month, whether it be One Piece, Dragon Quest, or My Hero Academia. The character will be at the forefront, but blending in with the text almost makes them the DNA of the magazine, the DNA of the publishing company that showcases them. It's a really cool piece of artwork, and you may think it's not artwork because, you know, not all magazines, I would say, have the art. One could argue that these girls are a piece of art, especially Ai Shinozaki. Oh my god, dude, I love her so much. She's so cute. But regardless, having a lot of the major publications still stick to showcasing the characters in so many different ways outside of their character roles is something that is to admire. And I think it's something that keeps the spark and the almost quality vintage of manga magazines. It's like when people look at 90s anime, there's that quality vintage and style, the roughness to it, the cells you don't get in modern animation. It's got that feeling when you look at a manga magazine, even of the recent ones. They have this kind of less clean look to them and much more roughness to them. Like you could actually touch the characters, and I imagine being there and having the magazines would be something great. I've even found recently there are people on Instagram who collect manga magazine first issues, which is a whole nother subculture I'd love to maybe make a video about. It's really cool and engaging to see artwork that was inside be represented on the outside, and I really love the vibe that they give. I hope to own maybe a couple of my own one day. It's subjective again to what you think maybe is art or isn't. It's just tabloids at the end of the day, right? It's a magazine that's trying to sell you a product. But I think what's special about these is that the product is something more than just a hairdryer or shampoo or anything like that. It's a story. It's trying to sell you a story. And I think there isn't a lot of magazines that are trying to sell you a genuine story with characters as opposed to the idealized story of how my husband tried to murder me. I don't know. That kind of clickbait. This is clickbait that feels a bit more genuine, feels a bit more real, and is something that I feel like you're always going to get what it is that maybe they're trying to intrigue you with. Even on YouTube today, everyone clickbaits, but it's good to find clickbait that engages you and makes you entranced in the image that you're looking at. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I think manga magazines are almost the best form of trickery on a magazine I've seen. But that's what I think. Tell me what you guys think. If you are interested in manga magazines, if you own some, like, tell me, like, what catches your eye about them? Something that you like about them as opposed to normal volume covers. Or maybe there's something you see the similarities between the two that you really like. Or a magazine that you think is, like, specifically really cool, does really cool artwork. Also, please help me find out what happened with these 2 issues. I still have no idea. That's all from me, guys. I appreciate it if you made it to the end. I'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe. It helps me out. Thanks again for watching to the end. My name's Mugen. As always, have a good one.